Iron deficiency anemia occurs when your body doesn't have enough iron to produce hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the part of red blood cells that give blood its red color, and it also enables red blood cells to carry oxygenated blood throughout your body. If you lack iron deficiency anemia may eventually develop. You can probably lack iron in your body due to inadequate iron intake, pregnancy or blood loss in menstruation, inability in absorbing iron, internal bleeding.
The primary symptoms of iron deficiency anemia include general fatigue, pale skin, pica, which is an eating disorder that results in the craving and ingestion of non-nutritive substances like dirt, ice, or clay, fast or irregular heartbeats, restless leg syndrome, which is a syndrome that causes tingling or crawling sensations in the legs, cholinergia, which is a nail disease that makes nails brittle and often causes them to occupy a flat or concave shape. Iron deficiency is actually the most prevalent nutritional disorder in the world. Around 2 billion people are anemic. Many of those are iron deficiency anemic. Unlike most nutritional disorders, iron deficiency anemia does not only largely affect developing countries, but it also largely affects industrialized countries.
Despite the fact that iron deficiency anemia is generally widespread around the world, countries that consume little meat in their diets tend to have a higher frequency of people suffering from iron deficiency anemia. These countries are 6 to 8 times more likely to suffer from iron deficiency anemia. This is because a large source of our dietary intake of iron actually comes from meat. In addition, infants, particularly those who are younger than 6 months, are likely to suffer from iron deficiency anemia. This is due to a low intake of iron, considering their diet usually solely consists of breast milk, which naturally lacks iron. Also, children and adolescents are similarly more likely to develop iron deficiency anemia. This is because growing children and adolescents experience high demands of iron.
The first part of diagnosing iron deficiency anemia is actually by diagnosing anemia. This can be done by observing the symptoms previously mentioned, especially those of fatigue, weakness, and pale skin. To further strengthen the initial diagnosis of anemia, a blood test can be performed to analyze the red blood cell count. If they are abnormally low, a diagnosis of anemia can be made. However, to be able to diagnose iron deficiency anemia, a process named iron studies needs to be performed. Essentially, the iron tests the serum iron, percent saturation of iron, ferritin, and iron binding capacity. For an iron deficiency anemic person, iron levels are expected to be low. In the same way, the percent saturation of iron will also be low. Considering that there is little iron in the blood, there will be less iron that is stored as ferritin, and therefore ferritin levels will also be low. The iron binding capacity, however, will actually be higher. This is because the body responds to the little iron in the blood and produces a higher iron binding capacity to combat iron deficiency. These results confirm that the person is suffering from iron deficiency anemia, and this diagnosis is made by anyone authorized to perform blood tests, for example, your doctor.
The biomolecules involved: hemoglobin, transferrin, ferritin. Hemoglobin is a red protein responsible for transporting oxygen in the blood. Transferrin is a protein of the beta-globin group which binds the transport iron in the blood. Ferritin is a protein produced in mammalian metabolism which serves to store iron in the tissues. Hemoglobin is a very essential component of the blood. It helps to carry oxygen from the lungs to the cells of our organs. To be specific, the iron in the heme group of the hemoglobin binds with oxygen to allow transport of oxygen, as this provides energy to the cells to perform their functions optimally. Having a low hemoglobin level can also lead to extreme fatigue, bruising easily, fainting spells, and in some cases, lack of blood clotting. Transferrin is another important biomolecule in the hemoglobin. It works to transfer iron throughout the body, just like its name transferrin suggests. Ferritin is needed to store iron. If iron is left free, it tends to take electrons from other molecules, and this reactively easily leads to hazardous toxicity. Hence, ferritin is significant in storing iron in a non-toxic form. Apart from hemoglobin, iron is very important for the function of all cells. Iron is especially needed for DNA synthesis and electron transport. If cells do not contain iron, they are not able to carry out electron transport, which is particularly important for mitochondrial cells.
The first biochemical process is that of absorption. Two forms of iron absorption are carried out by the body: iron uptake from the internal lumen and iron transfer out of the intestinal lining. From the diet, iron can exist as either ferrous iron, which is reduced iron, or ferric iron, which is oxidized iron. In order for absorption to occur, ferric iron must be reduced. This is done by a membrane heme protein that has recently been discovered named DCYTB. Then, the ferrous iron is transported by transferrin to where it's needed, and excess is stored in the liver as ferritin.
The most effective current treatments are iron supplement intake. These are iron salts or iron pills. This would solve decreased iron intake or iron demands for people like children and pregnant women. Intravenous iron. This is most especially for those patients who cannot take oral iron since it's not a pleasant thing to take. Blood transfusion. This is for patients who have severe anemia.
Because many of the symptoms associated with iron deficiency anemia are quite common, for instance, tiredness, many people do not recognize the symptoms of iron deficiency early enough, which then leads into the slow and steady development of iron deficiency anemia. Long-term remediation of the disease can be achieved by having a long-term iron balance. This means that food security plays a large role in the sustainability of remediation, considering that most cases of iron deficiency anemia develop off of dietary imbalance.